The distress call drifted through the void for almost 6 hours before anyone bothered to route it to a listening post. By then, most automated systems had already tagged it as low priority, non-strategic species. Everyone else in the galaxy had learned to ignore the pleas of weak worlds. Too fragile, too remote, too slow to repay a rescue. But when the signal finally reached the Terran relay station on Epsilon Ridge, a young operator named Mara leaned back in her chair, squinted at the trembling waveform, and frowned. "This isn't a normal distress pulse," she murmured. The audio was broken, heavy with static. Yet there was something raw in the voice, a mixture of terror and stubborn hope. Someone out there wasn't begging to live. They were fighting to hold on. Mara felt that pull in her chest that humans often felt when others turned away. She flagged the signal to command. Most officers would have dismissed it, but Captain Reese Hale wasn't like most officers. He replayed the message twice, listening to the faint rattling breaths, the distant explosions, the choked silence between words. "They're being hunted," he said quietly. "And they know it." His crew exchanged looks. The galaxy was wide, cruel, and efficient. Predators rarely left survivors. Reese stood slowly. "Prep the Valiant." Lieutenant Soren blinked at him. "Sir, are we really responding?" No one else did. Reese shrugged on his coat, voice steady. "That's exactly why we're going." He didn't give a speech. Humans didn't need speeches for this kind of thing. They just moved, quickly, purposefully. By the time the Valiant left dock, the signal had grown weaker, almost fading. Mara whispered under her breath, "Hold on, whoever you are." She didn't know their names, didn't know their species, but she hoped, deeply, that they weren't too late. The Valiant dropped out of warp with a shudder that rippled through the hull, as if the ship itself sensed the danger waiting ahead. A pale blue star burned in the distance, its light spilling across the shattered remains of an orbital station. Debris drifted like frozen ash, silent, weightless, telling a story no one wanted to hear. Captain Reese leaned forward in his seat. "Scan for life. Anything." Soren's fingers danced across the console. The display flickered, then steadied with a faint, pulsing trace. "I've got them." A cluster of life signs on the planet's surface. Very weak. The planet below was scarred. Entire regions looked burned, as though great claws had torn across the land. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Nothing natural did damage like that. "Bring us in," Reese said. The shuttle touched down on rough soil that still smelled of smoke. Wind carried ash across the ground, and distant hills glowed faintly with dying embers. It felt like they'd stepped into the aftermath of a nightmare. They found the survivors inside the remains of an underground shelter. Their skin was a soft jade color, eyes wide and dull with exhaustion. There couldn't have been more than 40 of them left. One of the elders tried to stand when the humans entered, but his legs buckled. Reese caught him before he hit the ground. "You came?" the elder breathed, barely believing the words. Reese tightened his grip gently. "We heard your call." No one else answered. Another whispered from the shadows. Reese looked around at the wounded, the terrified children clutching each other. The walls scorched from recent fighting. His jaw clenched. "They should have," he said quietly. Outside, a tremor rolled through the ground. Distant, heavy, rhythmic. Something was still hunting them. Soren swallowed. "Sir, we're not alone out here." Reese nodded slowly. "I know." And somewhere in the dark, the hunters stirred again. The tremor came again. Slower this time, but unmistakably deliberate. Not the shifting of wounded earth. Not the rumble of settling ruins. This was something alive. Something moving with purpose. Reese motioned for the survivors to stay behind him as he stepped toward the shelter entrance. The air outside was thick with drifting smoke, curling around blackened trees and jagged rock. It carried a strange metallic scent, sharp enough to sting the throat. Soren whispered, "Heat signatures, multiple. They're circling." Reese didn't draw his weapon yet. Instead, he listened. Humans had a way of sensing danger long before machines confirmed it. A faint clicking echoed through the fog, like claws striking stone. Then a deeper sound, almost like breathing, but too controlled, too calculating. "What hunted you?" Reese asked the jade-skinned elder, who had managed to stand beside him. The elder's eyes filled with dread. "The Krail. They cleanse worlds they deem unworthy. We were marked as waste." Soren muttered under his breath. "Monsters." "No," the elder corrected softly. "Efficient. That is worse." A shadow moved across the haze, tall, narrow, its limbs too long for comfort. Reese inhaled slowly. Fear was natural, but letting it control him wasn't. He turned to Soren. "Get the survivors ready to move." Quietly. "And you?" Soren asked. "I'll buy us the minutes we need." A figure stepped into view. Its skin was metallic, reflecting the burning horizon. Eyes like molten gold blinked mechanically. When it spoke, the voice was cold, flat, engineered. "Species 743. Final termination in progress." Reese exhaled. "Not today." The Krail lunged. Reese met it head-on, the collision sending dust exploding into the air. It was stronger than he expected, but not smarter. Humans survived death worlds for a reason, they learned fast. Behind him, the survivors scrambled from the shelter, guided by Soren toward the ridge. Reese only needed to hold the line long enough. But more shapes moved in the fog. Many more. The hunt was far from over. The ridge path was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to run side by side. Jagged stones cut through the soles of boots, and loose dust kicked up with every desperate step. Soren stayed near the front, guiding the survivors with quick hand signals instead of shouting. Noise would only draw more hunters. Behind them, Reese's fight echoed through the canyons. Metal striking metal, bursts of energy, the low animal sound of someone refusing to fall. Every few seconds, the ground shook. The Krail weren't subtle. They moved like machines built only for killing. A small child stumbled, and Soren grabbed her arm before she hit the ground. "Stay close," he whispered, trying to offer a smile. It came out tired, but real enough to calm her trembling. The elder limped beside him. "He is still fighting for us?" "He'll catch up," Soren said, though worry knotted in his chest. Humans were stubborn, but even stubbornness had a limit when facing an army. A sharp crack split the air. A blue beam carved a smoking trench just meters away. Krail scouts were moving ahead of the main group, trying to cut them off. Soren hissed, "Move!" They scrambled over rocks as another beam struck the cliff wall, sending fragments tumbling. One survivor screamed as a shard sliced her shoulder, but she kept running. Fear was stronger than pain. At the top of the ridge, the landscape opened into a valley filled with broken towers. Whatever civilization once lived here had fought long and hard before falling. Soren spotted the Valiant's shuttle's beacon blinking in the far distance. "We're close," he said, breathless. "Just keep going." A roar rolled through the valley, the kind that made even the stones tremble. The elder whispered, "The Krail have released their prime unit." Soren felt his blood run cold. Prime units were rarely deployed. They were sent when something needed to die without fail, and they were coming straight for them. The valley funneled every sound back toward them, each footstep, each gasp, each terrified whisper. And beneath all of it came the steady, thunder-like rhythm of the prime unit closing in. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. Predators walked slowly when they were certain of the kill. Soren kept the survivors moving, though his legs burned and his lungs felt lined with dust. The shuttle beacon flickered ahead, a tiny pulse of hope in a world that had nearly given up breathing. But the distance felt longer with every step. A sudden crash behind them made several survivors cry out. Soren spun around. The prime unit emerged from the smoke like a walking nightmare, towering, reinforced with heavy plating. Its face split into 4 mechanical mandibles that clicked open and shut as it scanned the terrain. Its eyes glowed a deep furnace red. The elder whispered, "No weapon of ours could ever scratch it." Soren didn't answer. He knew. Everyone knew. A burst of plasma streaked overhead, slamming into a ruined tower and sending burning fragments across the valley. The Prime hadn't even aimed at them, it was testing distance, testing fear. And then, from the far side of the valley, a familiar voice cut through the haze. "Get down!" A shockwave followed. Reese came charging out of the smoke, armor battered, breathing hard, but very much alive. In his hands was a scavenged Krail cannon nearly as long as he was tall. He fired again, the recoil shoving him back a full step. The blast hit the Prime square in the chest. Staggered, metal shrieking, but it didn't fall. "Of course you didn't," Reese muttered. "Why would anything be easy today?" Soren yelled. "We're almost to the shuttle." Reese didn't look back. "Then go. I'm right behind you." The Prime lowered its stance. The mandibles opened, and it began to charge. Reese grounded himself, bracing for the impossible. He wasn't stopping it. He was buying time. The Prime unit thundered forward, each step cracking the shattered ground beneath its weight. Reese felt the impact through his bones. He tightened his grip on the stolen cannon, knowing it had only one more reliable shot left in it. Maybe. The weapon hummed weakly, overheating from the fight he'd already forced it through. "Come on," he whispered to himself. "Just one more." The Prime leaped, its shadow stretching over him. Reese fired. The blast struck the underside of its jaw, snapping its mandibles sideways and making the giant stumble. Not fall, just hesitate. But a heartbeat of hesitation was enough for Reese to dive aside as it crashed down where he'd been standing. The shockwave hurled him into a broken pillar. Pain exploded down his ribs. He forced himself up anyway. Across the valley, Soren and the survivors sprinted toward the shuttle. Some kept glancing back, torn between fear and guilt. The elder stumbled at the ramp, turned, and bowed deeply toward Reese. Even from a distance, the gesture was unmistakable. Reese pushed off the pillar. He could barely breathe, but he moved. The Prime unit rose again, shaking debris from its frame. Sparks danced along cracked plating where Reese's shot had bitten deep. It rotated its head, locking onto him again. "Persistent bastard," Reese muttered. Then he saw it, the cliff edge, fractured and unstable, looming behind the Prime. The creature's last jump had weakened it further. Reese didn't think. He just ran. He sprinted straight at the Prime. It lunged, claws outstretched. At the last possible moment, Reese slid beneath its arm, slammed his entire weight into its damaged leg, and let momentum do the rest. The cliff groaned. The Prime toppled with a metallic roar, its claws carving trenches in the rock as gravity dragged it down into the abyss. Silence followed. Then Soren's voice cracked through the calm. "Reese, are you alive?" Reese exhaled, finally letting his knees give way. Define alive. The shuttle landed beside him minutes later. Soren hauled him aboard as the survivors watched with shining eyes, the elder whispering a single word in their language, one that translated simply to hope. As the Valiant lifted from the ruined world, the elder asked softly, "Why did your kind come for us, when no one else would?" Reese leaned back, exhausted but smiling faintly. "Because someone had to." And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt just a little less cold.